Hello and welcome to this very important look ahead at a crucial budget that's coming up very, very soon, right on our heads. Why do I say this is an important budget? It comes after two pandemics and in the midst of a third pandemic. Maybe this third wave will not be as serious as the first two. We hope not, but you never know. But what has happened is that the economy has suffered in these first two waves and is suffering even now. And perhaps the poorest have suffered the most. So this budget needs to boost the economy and think about the welfare of the poorest who really had a very difficult time during this partial lockdown, full lockdown, and really business and the economy is slowing down. So I've got four great industrialists, people who are practical, and I really hope the finance minister listens to them and what they have to say. I'm going to ask each of them to give us 2 points they'd like to see in the budget and 2 points they don't want to see in the budget. Let's start with you, sir, Narendran. If you can give us 2 points that you really like to see in the budget and 2 points that you're hoping will not be in this budget.
Thanks, Prannoy. I think from our side, CII, the points we've been making, one is, of course, the government needs to continue to invest on infrastructure. I think that's a great driver of demand. So that's one. Right. And secondly, given what has happened in the last couple of years, something to help on the consumption side, particularly the lower socioeconomic strata, people who've been impacted by jobs and people who had to spend more on health expenditure than they planned to over the last couple of years.
So those 2 points, one is infrastructure, which means more government spending to boost the economy. And the second is on the consumption side, boost the consumption of the lowest strata of the lowest income strata. That's what you're saying, to try and get consumption demand up from them. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because they've suffered the most. They need more security on jobs. The high contact sectors need some support. And of course, household balance sheets have been impacted by greater expenditure than planned on health. So a focus on health infrastructure.
Right. And what do you hope you will not see in this budget?
Well, I think no unnecessary taxes. I think it's better to simplify the tax structures, focus on compliance rather than add more layers of taxes. That is one. And secondly,
aren't all taxes unnecessary? According to the business community, aren't all taxes unnecessary?
No, I think CI has been clear on that. A lot of our requests on corporate taxes have been met with. So we are not having any additional requests. I think we'll stick with what we have. I think the point was more on, other taxes, on wealth taxes, inheritance taxes, etc. Because the last thing we want is to, again, impact consumption or sentiment in any way as we are going through the recovery.
And your second point you don't want to see in this budget?
Yeah, we don't want to see any policy flip-flops. I think we've seen what happens when we have retrospective taxes or when we go back on policy. That certainly hurts the investment sentiment from overseas. So we want to see policy stability. I think that's the best thing that can happen for investment, particularly foreign investors.
Very important. For foreign investors, in particular, say flip-flop, and they don't mind high costs, but they don't want flip-flop in policy. They don't want uncertainty and volatility. Is that right?
They want predictable costs rather than unpredictable costs.
Right. Whether high or low doesn't matter. Vikram Kirloskar, thanks very much. We'll come back to you, Naren, after we've just been through everybody's 2 points for and against. Vikram, what is your 2 points that you really would like to see in the budget?
Well, the first point, I'll put on my auto industry hat. And for the last several years, if I look at even the last 10 years, we haven't seen much growth in the auto industry, whether it's cars, passenger vehicles, whether it's two-wheelers, three-wheelers, commercial vehicles. And especially, although we've had a good recovery last year from the first COVID year, we see a depressed demand, especially on two-wheelers and entry-level vehicles. So my first really expectation, and I hope someone will do something, is to how to increase demand at the entry level in the auto sector. I think something similar to what Naren was talking about. how to find the
What
cash
exactly do you mean by that? Demand at the entry level?
I mean on the lower price vehicles, like the entry-level scooters, the entry-level two-wheelers. We've really seen a depression in that area. If you look at the volume of two-wheelers over the last 3 months, it has been substantially lower, one of the lowest in the last 9 years. So, I mean, it's a serious issue. I think we have to get out of this.
Really,
it requires, I think, substantial stimulation at that level. That's the first ask. I think very similar in line to what Naren is saying. And the second one is more a long-term expectation. India has made commitments regarding sustainability and net zero requirements in the COP summits, etc. But I think it's also our duty to our society in India that we pursue the net zero as well as sustainability in our own environment. So I think that we start studying carbon taxation.
If I can just ask you, you are doing quite a lot in sustainability in your industry, in your particular area actually, but managing to maintain costs at a low level and maintain profits. How do you have eco-friendly and environmentally friendly industrial processes that don't make your costs go through the roof?
I think there are a couple of areas when you look at it. I don't want to sound, because if I say something only what I'm doing, it cannot be right. I think there are areas...
It'll be inspiring for others. It'll be inspirational for others, yeah.
Okay, for discrete manufacturing, I think it's easier to take care of the environment. You can get a return on it. You can reduce your costs actually by reducing the impact of the environment. That's our experience. Whether it's reduction in electricity going to renewables, reduction in water, reduction of VOCs, and we've done a substantial amount of work on that, and actually it's reduced our costs. But I think if you look at power stations, steel plants, and those kind of large industry, we require a certain amount of government intervention and help, incentivization, because the scale of the issue is different. The technology issues are quite serious, and we need to incentivize that.
That could be an important aspect in this budget. Absolutely,
it's a very good point. Incentivization, as well as individual, as a society, what do I do in my behavior to look after the environment? So I think there's a requirement of behavioral change on an individual basis. So I think it's
time. But in the budget specifically, there should be some focus on helping the industry move towards sustainable, environmentally friendly processes.
We should incentivize, especially the big industry, fertilizer, steel, power, and some of these big ones. And they should be incentivized to go towards zero. They require the incentivization.
Very interesting. For
sure.
And what are the two things you would hate to see in this budget? Two things you'd hate to see.
I think I don't want the budget deficit to increase. I think we've done a very good job through the COVID time in managing the budget and tax collection. I would like the budget deficit to remain on an even foot. We remain a very viable country financially, is the first thing. And second thing, it's maybe a little more specific. I want the rupee to be stable, and I don't want anything that will hurt the stability of the rupee
either up or down.
Up and down too much going forward. I think it will hurt inflation. It will hurt our emphasis on manufacturing and many other places, many other things that the whole country is focused on.
Okay, let me move on to, I don't know which of you two are younger, Sanjeev or Chandrajit. I think since Chandrajit, you're the big boss, I go to Sanjeev and ask you your 4 points. Well, 2 for and a 2 against.
Yes, so let me start, Prannoy, with the 2 for. We've seen in this current year, this government divest Air India. Today was the day it was handed over, and we are awaiting the IPO of LIC, supposed to list in March. But while those have been great steps taken by the government, 2 swallows doesn't a summer make. So I would like to see a continued and firm divestment program. This sends a very strong message that government is not going to be in business. It is sticking to its word. it will do what it is good at and let private sector do what it's good at. So the two public sector banks, the one insurance company, we need that because we need more capacity, we need more capability and competition. So, and I think that will help us in the coming year itself. The second thing that I'd like to say...
No, just one second, a very important point. And everybody calls it disinvestment or divestment because privatization is a word, but one has to get to the, I mean, that's what it really means. And you're saying that will improve efficiency and it'll send a signal as well. And so far, every government has kind of been very slow on that, except perhaps the Vajpayee government, where Arun Shourie did a lot. But since then, this government, previous governments, divestment has been very slow. So that's been disappointing and you'd like to see that speeded up.
Clearly, we'd like to see that speeded up. I must say, after so many years of not moving ahead, the big divestment of Air India really puts a significant stamp of commitment from this government.
Yes,
but the reason I mentioned that is to say that's not enough. We need to continue and push harder and convert additional intent into action.
Okay, and your second point that you want in the budget?
Second point is really to start building for the medium term. We have seen that our healthcare infrastructure needed significant improvement. Our spends are just about 1.3% of GDP. We need to get to 2.5–3% in the coming years. Prepare ourselves for a next possible wave. We've done reasonably well in preparing ourselves for this third wave, but we can't just sit on our laurels so far. We need to anticipate what can go wrong ahead. So build healthcare. We are growing as a nation. We need to invest further.
That's a very important point because even if there's no other wave, just improving healthcare. One thing is to prepare for a wave, but it's not going to go to waste. The people of this country need good health services in any case. So spending money on that, I think you've hit a nail on the head, actually. Very important point. And the 2 points that you do not want in the budget, you're hoping against hope?
One, like what Naren said, but let me be very specific. No new undesirable taxes. No wealth tax, please. No inheritance tax. We are not the West. We are not a nuclear society. We are not a society where capital investment has already happened to build capacities. We are still using the money that our businesses are generating to reinvest. We need that, and we are a joint family system. We are not a nuclear family system where in the West, when the kids leave home, they don't look back, and hence those parents pay inheritance tax. Our situation is different. We must be proud about that, and hence no such taxes. That's one thing. The second is the world is now starting to normalize on monetary policy. Right, so you're going to start seeing interest rates go up in a measurable manner. That must happen, but no knee-jerk changes in interest rates. Provide enough visibility to everyone on what the interest rate cycle is likely to be. You, of course, cannot get into detail of what number and when, but provide that, like what we see happens in the US, and a guide path for that. So that is we have
a bit in agreement with Naren on saying no flip-flop, no uncertainty, no flip-flop. I think both Vikram Kirloskar and Naren said that. Finally, let's get to the big boss, Mr. Banerjee. Your 2 points that you like to see in the budget.
You put me in a spot because all my points have been well used up by all the three who spoke before me.
No, we're going to have a discussion on all the points again. But yes,
but I endorse all the points which have been talked about, like public investment in infrastructure, etc. But let me try and put some new thought, which I am trying to be different from what the others said. One, of course, we should see the budget aiming to rejuvenate the rural demand. That's very
rural demand.
Rural demand. And a holistic focus on rural economy, encompassing both farm as well as the non-farm sectors. Very, very important to enhance competitiveness.
So rural demand has gone down quite a lot, has it?
Yeah, so we need to see that we are, and as Naren mentioned, as Naren mentioned also, that we need to put more money in the hands of that particular sector. Both
and even Vikram Kirloskar mentioned, if you get that demand, you will get first level entry demand for, vehicles.
Yeah.
Actually, one would need to see a much more comprehensive sort of a statement, like, on competitiveness of agriculture, boosting the consumption demand, need to step up investment in, agri-infrastructure, things like cold chain, warehousing, logistics, irrigation.
Yeah.
These would really improve.
But agriculture needs focus. That's a very good point. And your second thing you'd like to see.
Agriculture as well as non-agricultural rural economy.
Yeah, rural areas, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
And second point you'd like to see in the budget?
Something, that's something where I think industry would also have a major role to play here. Of course, the government can make many important announcements in the budget. Are two very critical areas where we have not seen happen much in India, and a lot of scope: technology upgradation, and R&D, research and development. It's just not only left to the government. So that technology would be important when we talk about competitiveness. I would like to see something like a overarching technology commission of India, which can coordinate, integrate,
I think Sanjeev Bajaj is also hinting at innovation and
exactly a technology fund. A technology
fund. Then what's the nightmare for you? Two things you don't want to see.
So let's not give ideas today at your show. But definitely in agreement with what the others were saying. But I would definitely not like to see any reduction in outlays of schemes like the Manrega, which create livelihood and assets in the rural areas. I'm really taking on from the first point that I said. I do not wish to see any reversal in any types of economic reforms process which has been strongly sort of initiated in many cases. That will really
keep the reform process on. So
yes,
gentlemen,
and anything going back will impact the business sentiment or dampen the recovery process.
That's very true. Gentlemen, if I go back to any one of you to ask you that everybody seems to want to spend on Narega, spend on the poorest segment, improve demand in the rural areas. What about the budget deficit? Will that go through, explode? Should we, at a time like this, when we want to boost the economy, not think too much about the budget deficit, or should we be prudent and careful about the budget deficit? Naren.
So, we seem to be on track for what was budgeted this year. So at 6.8 or in thereabouts, which is good. But I think the glide path below this should be managed well, because as we know what's happening across the world, the Fed is talking of increasing interest rates, money is flowing out of some of the emerging markets. Private sector investment is just about starting to happen in India. So we want public sector investment to continue so that the private sector investment comes back. Consumption, which has traditionally been strong in India, has been a bit fragile, as we've been saying. So I think we need another year of ensuring that the recovery is totally on track, because, one thing we should also remember is, while we've had 9.5% growth, the first half of the year was more than 9%. So the second half of the year, in some sense, has been less than 9%. So when you look at next year's growth, unless you do something, unless you keep your hand on the wheel and make sure that the investments flow, the recovery may not happen as we would want it to happen, and that will certainly impact jobs.
So we're really looking for the recovery. And Vikram Kirloskar, at a time like this, should we just say one more year, don't look too much at the budget deficit, boost in infrastructure, help consumption of the poorest sector, give them higher incomes, and don't worry too much about your balance sheet of the finance ministry, the budget deficit?
We have to push the recovery. And yes, we don't have to look at the budget deficit so strictly, but we should certainly prioritize the spending, which will give the maximum bang for the buck as we go along.
That's
what will give us the maximum recovery in the economy. I think that's most important. Just spend prudently. That's about it.
Sanjeev Bajaj, your view on this trade-off between spending a lot and helping the poorest sectors and boosting infrastructure because private investment may not come back fast enough, and the worry about inflation as a result of the budget deficit going up, money supply going up. That's a trade-off, and inflation is a threat these days, especially consumer price inflation in India and around the world actually.
Yeah, so that's many questions in one. I agree with the direction that both Vikram and Naren are talking about. So the good thing is, if you see in the last 6 months, we have many months where we are seeing great indirect tax collection, GST, growth has been good, which means that as long as we can keep this pandemic waves in check, the economy is growing. And that's why I believe that we should be able to keep the fiscal deficit in check this year, as has already been said by others as well. And we have to start moderating it, but in a gradual way. Have to be ready if there is another bad wave. We will have to put money.
This year you're saying don't spend. You're saying don't spend too much this year and let the budget deficit go out of hand. Like it's what it could be 6.8. Do you mind if it goes to 8%? That's a lot.
No. It should not. We don't need to unless there's a crisis on hand. I don't see the need for that. But clearly prioritizing investment, as Vikram just said, put it into infrastructure because that has a multiplier effect. And
I think that's a wonderful.
Keep something in your pocket for another possible bad wave. Keep that in mind as well. You can't spend everything.
Chandrajit, just listening to everybody, what is your summary reaction? I'll ask everybody for a 30-second summary now because coming to the end.
On the fiscal side, I think that given that both the direct and the indirect tax collections have been pretty strong, government is pretty much likely to meet the fiscal deficit target for this year. And the strong revenue collection really would offset any shortfall in the receipts from the disinvestment. So for FY23, it would really be, it would be very, very important for the government to finally balance growth and fiscal prudence like what everybody talked about. But as a sharp fiscal consolidation would really destroy this recovery process that we are seeing. So what I would expect the government to maintain is its focus on infrastructure investment and allocate more resources towards the national infrastructure pipeline. And therefore, I would say the reduction in fiscal deficit target for FY23 is set to be modest, and the target could be somewhere between 6.3 to 6.4% of the GDP.
But don't come down to 5 or something. Yeah, okay.
I don't think so. No, not at all. Yeah.
That's a very good point because we haven't quite got out of the crisis yet and we need to boost the economy still. That's what it's a common thread running through. Finally, 30 seconds, Vikram Kirloskar, from what you heard.
I've heard a lot of criticism in the last 2 years on India handling COVID. And I keep asking, which country has done better? And no one is able to answer me that very clearly.
I'm saying stick to the budget.
Yeah. And why I said COVID is we are going to, we managed the money through the budget, through the COVID. We managed to get the economy back on a growth track through the COVID. I think it's with that optimism and that confidence we should go ahead on the budget, on the spending, on the infrastructure spending.
Sanjeev Bajaj, your final comments? Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Let's look through a new lens for lives and livelihood. On lives, let's continue to build new capacity on healthcare, get the boosters in, do the trials for mix and match, get the therapeutics in. Because if we disrupt life less, then we can look at livelihood and focus on growth as well. So new lens for life and livelihood.
Very well put. Yeah. Look ahead and plan, especially in the healthcare sector. The big boss, Mr. Banerjee. 30 seconds and I'll end with Naren.
Yeah, so I think what I would like to also see in this budget, given whatever we discussed, is how we become as a country more competitive. A competitive country in terms of, say, manufacturing, say, for instance. That's something that we would like to see. So enablers from the government to see that growth, of course, but then we become competitive so that we can sustain that growth and we are able to see, have certain visionary targets. We really need to look at 5 years hence. We need to look at 10 years hence, and therefore a budget which will lead us to a growth path where India can be a very competitive country.
Yeah, with as you said, don't slow down reforms, don't have flip-flop, don't have uncertainty, don't have volatility, and focus on recovery. Final words with you, Naren.
So, Prannoy, CII's theme for this year is competitiveness, growth, sustainability, and technology. So I think if the finance minister addresses all 4 of them, we are happy.
If any finance minister can do that, be a total genius. If any of us could do that, bring in a very specific sense, all the comments we've heard, in a nutshell, what is really needed in this budget? The single focus.
I think sustaining the recovery is the most important thing. I don't think we should assume we are back on track.
Well,
we should give it another year, ensure that we are back on track, and then we can experiment further.
Absolutely excellent. And, I've heard from the inner circle that the finance minister has said, whatever you guys have said, she's going to do this time. So I'm so glad she made very sensible suggestions, and I hope all of them, and I feel confident that they will happen. Thank you very much for sparing the time, and I look forward to seeing you on Budget Day. Thank you very much. Thank you, CII, and thanks all of you.